so you started sleeping with stuff under your pillow just in case somebody broke in and tried to take him. He was prepared.
And then when he got old enough to have a gun, then the gun was under his pillow.
Well, listeners, it's funny because my parents maybe remember it differently, but they didn't like me watching The Simpsons, but they let me watch Terminator.
Welcome to Something More Human. I'm Sam.
And I'm Elliot. We're a married couple exploring human connection and its impact on ours, our guests, and our listeners' lives.
Join us in creating something more human.
Obviously, a lot of this podcast is about our listeners' input, and so they'll ask us questions that they want to hear on the podcast. So a listener question for you two specifically from a friend of ours is, can you share more about your journey to choosing parenthood? Because obviously for you guys, it's not like it wasn't planned. You guys wanted to have kids, right? Or as far as I know. Can you talk about your journey to choosing parenthood and how that commitment has maintained over so many years? Or, how has your commitment to parenthood changed? Or just tell us about your journey to choosing to be parents.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, of course, we knew from the beginning that we wanted kids. Mm-hmm. Larry wanted, a house full, 10 of them. And I'm like, I'll give you 2, maybe 3, but we're not going to have a house full.
Could you imagine 10?
I think we'd been married 3 years when we had Marissa, your oldest sister. And looking back on it, I was very young. I was 20 when we got married, and I was 23 going on 24 when I had her, which is pretty young. Yeah. I had no clue what I was doing. And, you just jump in with both feet and make a lot of mistakes, especially with the first one. She said, "Oh, I was your trial child," and I said, "Yeah, unfortunately, you were."
For most parents, the first
we
one
had
is the trial
to
child,
do a lot of things that we shouldn't have done, and but every kid's different. So
I'm curious about the transition between sort of the dynamic of I'm the parent, you're the child, right? When your kids are little, to now you have these 3 full-blown adults who have their own lives, their own spouses. And the relationship dynamic has changed, right?
Definitely.
Now you have a little bit more of a friendship with your children.
Right.
What has that transition been like for the both of you?
Well, I'll say that when, I said I had Marissa really early and didn't know what the heck I was doing. And she was a strong-willed child. And so I had a hard time dealing with her, knowing how to be a mom to her and discipline her, because I'm not saying I was the best child, but I was very obedient to my parents and couldn't imagine making them upset with me. So it was hard for me to have a child who actually didn't care if she made me mad. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know how to deal with it. And so Larry dealt with her more than I did as far as discipline goes. And early on it was, it was spanking. That's how we grew up, and that's...
Yeah, the discipline was really something that was, I think you learned from your parents. And my dad was a strict disciplinarian, and he spanked us a lot. I mean, I don't think today, in today's society, that would be looked on as something that's normal.
Sure.
Okay, not at all.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so that was my understanding of discipline. And so as we grew in our adulthood and being parents, we realized that we were making a lot of mistakes. And Marissa saw that as something that she seemed to be very uncomfortable forgiving for many, many years. And so we got to learn how to discipline better. And of course, our children were never our friends. They were never our friends. They were our children, and we made it known that they are our children, not our friends. Mm-hmm. Right. And now they're our best friends.
Right.
I can talk to Elliot about anything. He can talk to me about anything. I can talk to Leah and Marissa about anything, and we're friends now, and that's what's really cool about the relationship now.
Yeah, that was one thing that I also had to learn with Marissa, because she was the oldest, and she would tell me when she was like a preteen or early teenager, well, so-and-so's friend and her mom are best friends, and you just don't treat me like that. And I had to tell her, I'm not your friend, I'm your mom. I said, I'll be your friend when you're an adult, but I'm not your friend right now. And I see that a lot in parenting today, where the parents don't want to make the children upset. So they do anything to make their kids happy, and they don't discipline them and make them understand that, there are certain things you can and cannot do. And as a parent, we know better. If you want to run across the road, I have to tell you that you're going to get hit by a car maybe. And you can be mad at me about it, but I know what's best. Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing that we learned. There's a lot of tough love in parenting, and you have to do that. It doesn't come naturally, but the more you do it, the more confident you feel about it.
And so the payoff has been that our children are pretty successful, and although we gave them tough love, and I learned that there was something different about that. There's something that's interesting is that we learned that if we tell our children the rules ahead of time, okay, this is the punishment or the restrictions that are going to come on you if you don't obey. And so although it was tough, what it's proved out to be is our children are very good people today. Each of them love us. They don't resent us. And so whatever we did in discipline turned out to be the right thing that we did. But we did have to analyze our discipline. It was done out of being angry and instead of out of instruction.
You have to adjust as you go. And like I said, each child is different. You have to handle each one differently and adjust to that as they change and you change. The goal is, in raising children, is to raise them to be responsible, caring adults. And that is the goal. And the goal is to raise them to leave the house and know how to take care of themselves, not to make them want to stay in your house forever, because that's not good for them or for your marriage. Because in a marriage, your spouse is your first priority. Even though your children will take up a vast majority of your time, your husband or your wife is your priority. The children are second, and that's just the way it is. And like I said, that will change a little bit. You know, when you have babies, of course, you're going to be, you know, if you're nursing, you're going to be with the baby all the time. But in your mind, you've got to understand that your spouse comes first. And your children are second, because they're going to leave home someday, and you're going to be with your husband forever or your wife forever.
And I think that's something really important for younger people who are just married. Is it a commitment for life or not? If it's a commitment for life, then you need to realize and visualize that one day you're going to be apart from your kids. Your kids are not going to be in home anymore. What are you going to be like to each other? Are you going to still be best friends? Or have you wrapped up all of your life into the children, and then when they leave, you have no life together? And so I see that in my line of work, being a hairdresser. I've seen so many families, and I've seen their families just break up. There's nothing left.
Well, it seems almost like I don't know, I don't have kids, but to me it seems like almost like a stage of grief.
Yes.
Like it's almost like it happens to everyone, because you can't help but be all in. Well, some people aren't, unfortunately, but you can't help but be all in on your kids.
Yes.
And then they leave, and that's not gradual. That's like, they've gone, they've moved, they've married, they're out of the house. Like that seems like something that's hard that everyone has to go through.
But you said that word, they're all in and then they leave. You don't need to be all in. You need to be pulling away. The older your child gets, the more you have to step back. The more, when they're teenagers, they're going to make mistakes, and you can't prevent that, and you shouldn't, because they're going to learn from those mistakes, so that when they're ready to leave, they've understood that. And you've already stepped back enough where you don't feel like you've got to smother them and direct their lives forever.
Right.
You shouldn't be doing that. You should be preparing your children to leave home.
Did you guys have specific conversations about that? Because that seems like something that you can't just turn on. Like, did you and Dad sit down and say, okay, like they've reached this pinnacle, like we've got to start. Like how does that? Yeah, I'm just curious. Like, how do those things happen? I don't
remember. Yeah, I don't remember ever discussing that transition. Because we had 3 children, we saw Marissa go. Okay, and so Elliot and Leah were still with us. So unfortunately, at the time that Marissa left, she was still disrespectful and
rebellious.
Challenging, rebellious. So when she left, it was like a freedom. And it was a freedom for her. So 6 months after she had left and she was on her own, then we became friends, where we were just fighting each other up to the point when she left. And then we became friends. And so then Leah and then Elliot. So it was a transition out. And so I don't really remember a time that when they were gone, we were, oh my gosh, they're gone.
Well, I don't think we discussed parenting that way. I think it kind of naturally happened because we grew up in the same era of discipline that that's pretty much how our parents made us feel is, you sit down and be quiet, and your mom and I are going to have a conversation or something. You're not the most important thing to me.
Right.
So that's how we kind of carried on. I think we both felt the same way, that we're raising our children to become responsible and good adults so they can leave home someday.
Well, speaking of pulling away gradually, maybe on the opposite end of the spectrum, you both have parents that have passed away. Is there like, I don't know, I would think that maybe you two weren't as close or weren't as friendly with your parents as you are with us because times are just different, right?
Yes.
But still, like, they were your parents. You loved your parents. They loved you.
Yes.
How was the transition from, your parents being alive to being gone? How did you both deal with that? How did you both deal with that loss of your parents? I think that's something that I'm interested. I know that we've talked a little bit about with you, that you got pretty depressed, right?
Well, I lost both my parents within 4 months of each other. So that was a lot. That was not a good year. 1999, they both passed away. And I was the youngest of all of the children. And so my parents were quite a bit older. They were both not well. My mother was not physically well. My dad had dementia. And so, you never want to see your parents go. But when my mother passed away, it was almost a relief that she wasn't in the state that she was in anymore. And for my dad as well, because he was mentally not there. So it was almost a relief at that point. But yeah, we still miss them. And I was very close with my mom, but because we never lived there after we got married, we weren't around them like you guys,
Right.
We see each other quite often. Even though you live in Denver, we still see each other quite often. Mm-hmm. What about you?
When my mom passed away, it was interesting how she, first of all, she passed away a lot sooner than we thought. She was only 75 years old. We thought for sure we'd have my mom for another 10 years. And so when she passed away, I remembered that in the hospital we were all together, and we knew that she was dying, and we were letting her go. And so when she passed away, one of the things that my mom did was made me feel really comfortable about her life. We would go to lunch or breakfast every week prior to her death, maybe the last 6 months or a year.
You and mom together would go?
Me and mom, you would go sometimes, but I would definitely be with mom, and we would have breakfast. And my mom would say, I'm just so happy with my life, Mm-hmm. I've just been so blessed all my life. I'm happy. And so when she died, I remember that my mom didn't die. She just wasn't here anymore. And she was very happy, and she was very content. And so she made me feel that she's fine. And that was really a great thing that she did. Mm-hmm. And my dad now, who's 93, he's lived a long life. He always says how happy he is where he's at. He's got dementia, but he seemed to be very content. So I know when he passes away, it's not going to be a loss.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that about Grandma.
She, Grandma Josie loved her children so much, and she loved being around us so much. And it was more like a friendship type of thing. Mm-hmm. She was kind of like my mother, where they knew, you have a family now, and I will give you advice if you ask me for it, but I'm not going to tell you how to run your life. So they stayed out of our business, which was good, and let us, have our own life. But if we needed to ask them, they were always there to help us, if we needed help. But it was very much a friendship with Grandma Josie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's good perspective to have from Grandma, because her life wasn't very easy.
No, not at all.
To say at the end of it, towards the end, that I'm so happy. Like, how many people have much easier lives and aren't, don't realize that, or aren't as happy.
Right.
I just never heard that story, but I just think about Grandma, of all people, had a pretty, challenging life.
Yes.
She got married at 15, and she had a kid every year until she was 22 or 23.
21. She had 5 children by the time she was 21.
21.
Like,
right.
dude,
I know the audience hearing that, you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's what I say. Oh my gosh.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Babe,
Yeah.
You imagine?
No, I can't imagine.
And then she had 3 more.
Yeah.
Later, she divorced Larry's dad and remarried, and so she had 3 more children.
Crazy.
And so she had what her life. We won't get into that, but she had a tough life.
Yeah.
She did, but she wanted to have. She said to me when she was a little girl, she said, God, I want to have 8 children.
Right, and she did.
And
she had 8 children.
Yep. So that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
That number specifically.
She loved children, and she loved her
Grandchildren,
and she loved her
great-grands.
grandchildren very much.
And Sam, she would have loved you to death.
You've obviously told us some absolutely crazy, insane stories, Dad, in your childhood, right? And you always kind of say this thing like, I should have died so many times, because it's true, which is kind of crazy to think about. And, all these things that you did, like, you talk about your belief a lot. You think that, like, you say that, God protected you, and led you, eventually, obviously, to mom and into your family, into your life that you have now. But yeah, I wanted you to tell one of your stories, because you have so many stories that almost don't sound real, that for all those things to happen to one person. And so some of these stories are just absolutely insane. But the sewer story is a pretty crazy one. And that happened pretty young too, right?
Well, for the audience, it sounds kind of bizarre that we're talking about a sewer story. So the context will fit once I describe what that is all about. But as a young kid, I was no different than any children today that do stupid things, break into cars for no reason, shoot at cars with a BB gun for no reason. And you see kids do it today and you're wondering, what's wrong with these stupid idiots? And so I was one of those stupid idiots. I was just rebellious. And our rebellion one day took me to get a gallon of gasoline and pour it down a sewer, manhole sewer. In every community you have these big steel sewer caps that weigh probably about 100 pounds with one hole in the center. And I just wanted to see what it would look like down there. So I took a gallon of gasoline, poured it down the hole, got on my hands and knees with a match. And you guys are thinking about, wow, what are you doing? Yeah, that's like a big bomb in there. And so I got on my hands and knees and I struck the match. And on my hands and knees, I drop it and I look down into that little hole. It's about 1.5 inches in diameter, and watch the match go to the bottom and go out. And so I was really sad and disappointed that it didn't light up. And so I took another match and did the same thing, and it still didn't go out, and it didn't light up. And so I was really frustrated. So I told my friend Chris, I've got a sparkler, so we'll go get a sparkler because it'll definitely light it up. And so I brought it down and I told him, go ahead and light it. And if you've ever lit a sparkler, it doesn't light immediately. It takes about 4 or 5 seconds before the match will actually cause it to spark. And it didn't do it fast enough for me. And so I said, give it to me. And so I gave him the sparkler and I lit it, and it lit. And I said, Chris, hurry, there's a car coming. So instead of dropping it and looking, the car caused me not to look down. And as soon as I dropped it, the biggest explosion that the whole neighborhood heard, with the steel cap shooting 20 feet in the air, with the blue, I remember seeing a blue, 10-foot blue flame come out of that single hole, and the cap blew up. So yeah, I should be dead. And that's one of the things that I did. And now, to tell you that experience didn't stop me from messing with fire, about a month later, I took the same gallon of gasoline and we walked about 2 blocks from our home. There was a new community being built, and there were these manhole covers and all this arranged sewers or streets. And so we lifted off the cap, walked down inside this manhole, poured the gallon of gasoline, let it run down the tunnel, and lit it. So, I mean, that's just one example of so many things that I did. I didn't ever consider the consequence of the things I did. And I did so many things that I should have really died. I did a lot of drugs.
You should be in jail, too.
I should be in jail. I broke into houses. I broke into safes. I just never learned. I mean, I knew my dad would kill me if I did these things. For some reason, it just didn't register.
You were a adrenaline junkie, man.
So it's something, And so I'm really fortunate to be alive and have 3 kids that I love and a wife that I love.
And you graduated high school?
And
barely.
Barely.
That's pretty impressive, though, man.
Yep.
I was going to say, you passed a little mischief onto your kids. So
oh my gosh, a little?
They just gave you a little taste of the heart attacks that you gave your parents.
I'm sorry, Sam.
Well, actually, luckily, Elliot's not super an adrenaline junkie. Like, you're really annoying sometimes, but I'm not overly concerned that you're gonna do something and
do you know why?
Die.
Because when I was pregnant and I found out I was having a boy, I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot handle it if he's like Larry. What am I gonna do? And I would just pray, Lord, please help me, help this little boy not to be crazy like his dad. Well, he's like totally the opposite. He's very cautious.
Yes.
He thinks things before he does them. Now, he got crazy as he grew up, but he wasn't like his dad.
He does have an exceptional aversion to death, though.
Yeah, I would not like to die ever.
Well, I thought that was maybe like an anxiety thing of your adulthood. Like, oh man, I'm not feeling well. I'm probably going to die. But you've told me that even as a little boy, he's like, Mom,
he's always been
is this
that way.
roller coaster? Am I going to die?
Right. He would not do anything if he thought he was going to die.
The more I think about how impactful like social media, or not social media, just content, just whatever you experience in your life is, the more I realize like us as humans, we've all seen too much now with our phones. But when I was younger and we were watching like a Dateline NBC show, in the story, the mother killed her son in this particular story.
Gosh.
So that night I slept with you guys on the side of your bed. I slept on your side on the ground. I don't know why I didn't usually do that, but I did that night. And I stayed up all night because I thought that my mom was going to wake up and kill me.
Oh my gogosh.
Right, because your mom is so homicidal.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
But still, so then I remember for years, like when I was maybe 6, 7, and 8, I would lay down in the bed and put the sheets over my head. And I went between cracking the door and locking it and cracking and locking it because I thought one might be safer than the other. I would have like a bat or a knife or something under my pillow.
He used to keep weapons under his pillow.
I would just like lay down and pull the covers over my head and watch the door, just waiting for someone to come in to kill me until
you fell asleep.
For days and days and days and days and days of my life.
There were a rash of like children being abducted from their homes at that time too, which you saw in the news.
Like in Albuquerque?
No, just nation. They would come out with stories about that, and so you started sleeping with stuff under your pillow just in case somebody broke in and tried to take him. He was prepared.
And then when he got old enough to have a gun, then the gun was under his pillow.
Oh my gosh. How do you prevent that though? Like as a parent, you can't
shield them from everything. No,
Right.
You can't.
Well, listeners, it's funny because my parents maybe remember it differently, but they didn't like me watching The Simpsons, but they let me watch Terminator.
Oh, please.
So I remember watching The Mermaid a lot and Terminator 2.
I told you we made a lot of mistakes, okay?
I don't count that as a mistake. I'm glad you let me watch Terminator 2 as a child. It's a cinematic masterpiece, so.
Well, you and your mom are both cinephiles.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. We love movies.
Speaking of movies, I think Elliot wanted to hear a story from you all on your way back from a movie or on the way to a movie.
Oh, yeah. Can I tell the story, please?
Of course.
So it was Friday, July 13th, 1979.
Wow.
Look it up on your calendar. It was Friday the 13th. We were going to go to a movie, and we lived a little ways from the city that we were going to, Pensacola. So we were driving, and it's dark already. We're going to a late movie because when you're young, you can go to a late movie. We can't do that anymore. So we were going to a late movie. We were coming out of Pace, Florida on Highway 90. You're going into a straightaway it's a causeway, and it goes over a series of, there's marshland there, so there's a series of little bridges, and then you do go over like a bay and then into Pensacola. And so there's nothing out there. It's just flat marshland. And I believe there were street lights early on, but once we got out to that area, there were no street lights. And we noticed lights in the sky just above the road. And I said, what is that?
I'm looking down the road, and it looks like a plane coming at us, because there are obviously planes in the sky, and you would see them often. And I looked at this one light, but if it's the plane's coming toward me, and I know that if it's white, it is coming toward you, because planes going away don't have that white light. You see red and green lights on either side of the plane. So anyway, it just didn't seem like it was going fast enough to be a plane. And as we got closer to it,
he said, I think it's a plane. But as we got down the hill and we're on the straightaway, we could tell it was, how high above the highway would you say it was?
150 feet.
Okay, so 150 feet above the highway. And both of us knew then, this is not a plane, and it's not moving. It's actually hovering above the highway. And so we are slowing down, and as we got near to this object, it had a white light at one end and a white light at the other end, and the width of it was probably about
50 feet, maybe?
Maybe 50 feet. And so I told Larry, I said, when we get closer, I'm going to roll down my window and stick my head out to see if I can see what it is. Well, just before we got up to it, boom, a spotlight went on our car. I mean, just like Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
A big light.
A big white spotlight.
It lit up a big area.
Yes. And as soon as it came on, I mean, it was on for maybe 3 seconds, and it went off. And right then, we were going to go under it. So I hurried up and stuck my head out. Well, it's pretty dark, and I, really couldn't make out a lot, but it was your typical, what they call cigar-shaped UFO. As soon as we got under it, we pulled off the side of the road, and the truck behind us pulled off the side of the road. And we got out, and there was 2 men and a girl that got out of that car, out of the truck. And we all stood there and looked at it, and the guy said, "What the hell was that?" And we're like, "We don't know." And we just stood there and looked at it for how long?
I don't know.
Maybe 5 minutes?
No, I wouldn't say it was that long.
Oh, maybe a couple of minutes?
Yeah, and you could see it would rock back and forth.
Just a little.
And it just slowly went
away.
away.
But wait, but tell them the odd thing about it.
Yeah, there was no sound.
Not a sound.
There was not a sound. And not even a sound as you hear a balloon when it takes off. Hot air balloon, where you will hear
there's no sound at all. No motor, no engine, nothing.
And it just went away.
It rose up in the air, and then it went south.
What was the movie that we were going to see?
Oh, and then we were on our way to go see Alien, of all things.
To be seeing Alien on Friday the 13th and seeing that, I'm like, I
know, it was just too much. It was almost
insane.
Like, wow.
Okay, well, so we have another listener question for you all.
Oh, no, okay.
Larry, this question is for you specifically. Kind of in the realm of the transition from boyhood to manhood. A little bit more context. In past episodes, we've talked a lot about vulnerability, and it's becoming a theme that we discuss pretty often. And Elliot's said many times, it's really hard as a man to be vulnerable and to have male friendships. I attribute Elliot's emotional intelligence and vulnerability to you modeling that for him, being really open with telling people how much you care about them, how much you love them, showing them, and making that a habit and a piece of your personality. But what was that like to develop, especially growing up in the time that you did, right? Where machismo and men were expected to be a certain way and a certain toughness or hardness.
Well, especially with your particular relationship with your dad. And that was a very difficult relationship, in terms of the kind of love that you received.
Well, that's a good question because I grew up where I was a small guy and I was picked on, and I always wanted to try to live up to other kids. I wanted to be as big as them, but I was never as big as them. And so you would think that would be different. And I don't know why I became vulnerable. And I think that I know I thought this, that for somebody like me, I need to show some type of vulnerability to others so they are not afraid. I've always been able to shed a tear in front of my family, in front of my kids, and I didn't see that as a sign of weakness. I thought that was really a sign of strength, but I wasn't doing it to prove how strong I was. I was trying to prove who I really am, and my love for my wife. I've always been very affectionate. I need more affection. I want more affection from her, and I know that she loves me. But she's not as affectionate as I am. But I don't know why I always wanted to be vulnerable. Among my friends, male friends, I'm vulnerable.
You always have been, to a fault almost.
Sure.
He will say things. He's not afraid to tell on himself, and to just say, hey, this is me. I admire that because there's things that I wouldn't say to my girlfriends. And I was going to say, too, your personality is very much like your mother's. Do you agree? Grandma Josie was a very outgoing, everybody loved her. She was very outgoing, very affectionate. And I think Larry has a lot of his mother's traits in him.
How do you guys feel about getting older?
I will say something I say a lot. For the last 10 years, I've been thinking a lot about dying. I think about dying almost every day. Now, that's only something that someone older is going to do, because I'm sure you guys don't think about dying. You've got a lot of years left to live.
Well, your son does.
I don't think about dying.
Yeah, but I'm talking about dying. And I often say to people at work, before I know it, I'll be dead. And I say that, and it's not, a lot of people think that's, well, don't say such a thing, Larry. And I'm thinking, you know what? The more I live, the more I see people just die. And so before I know it, yeah, I'll be dead. I don't want to die. I want to live. I want to live to see you guys live your life and see the success you all go through and having children. I want to be with my wife, my best friend, for at least another 30 years if possible. And so I think about dying, but I'm ready to die. And I'm ready to die because I'm happy. I can see my mother, as I told you earlier, she was happy. She was content. I'm happy and content. Mm-hmm. So if I die today, I know that I would die the happiest man and the richest man I've ever known. And so I'm really ready. And I say that all the time. I think about that. Now, if you were to ask your grandpa about that, he's 93 years old. What do you think he's thinking? How often do you think he's thinking about dying? Probably every moment.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be long. So I don't know if that answers the question. But,
actually, the question wasn't about death.
It wasn't?
It was about aging.
Well, you got there, though. You got there. You just said
that is part of aging. You think about death more. But
Right.
I think aging, I feel, and I know Dad can attest to this as well, I still feel like I'm 35. Mm-hmm. Marissa turned 40 this year, and I was like, I've got a 40-year-old daughter. I was just 40 the other day. And it does go by so fast. Time goes by so fast the older you get. And no, I don't like aging. I don't like how my body feels and how my body looks. But I'm trying to age gracefully. I'm not trying to fight it and have all this surgery and stuff. And that's women and men who want to do that. I'm not knocking them. It's just not for me. Aging's hard, but with it comes a lot of wisdom.
Speaking of wisdom, and I want your audience to hear this, is really important because this is one of the things that I noticed at work. All you young people who look at old people, you see old people, and you think that they're too old they're short in something. They're just old and they don't really know much. They don't really feel much. And that is not true at all. And although some of you think that 50 is old, when you get there, you'll find out that it's not. And I was thinking that this older woman was talking to my coworker as if they were the same age. And then I thought and looked at this lady. Well, inside her is a 35, 40-year-old woman who wants to be just like her 50-year-old friend. And she has just as much life and just as much value as the young people who look at old people thinking that they've already passed their age and they're done. And so I think it would be beneficial to everyone. You're speaking about humanity. We need to look at everyone and give the older people the grace and the love and respect because they are young inside. And they're approaching death quicker than most people, but they still inside are these people that are young.
And another thing, I think looking back on my life, I wish that I would have, when I was in my young 20s having children, in my 20s having children and trying to live life, I wish that I would have sought out an older woman who maybe was in her 40s or 50s to be a mentor to me about life. Sure. But at that age, you don't think about that. We had a good church where we had a lot of people of different ages, and certainly there could have been somebody there that I could have approached and said, because you don't normally make friends with people who are much older than you. Your acquaintance with people, you might be an acquaintance with somebody here who's older, but you don't seek out friendships normally. So it's more like a mentorship. And I think that's something that I wish I would have done.
I kind of want to transition a little bit towards marriage. So you mentioned, yes, you have children, but you really have to hold your marriage as the highest priority. You've been married 43 years. What are some of the most important lessons about marriage or love that you've learned in 43 years? And we know there's no secret sauce, right? It's not like, if you just do this one thing, it'll be perfect.
Absolutely not. Right. Every couple's different. Every dynamic is different. But I think basically, we were very young when we got married, but I think we had a basic, we both had a basic belief in God that we both chose to follow very carefully together. And we made the commitment when we said we were going to get married that we were going to stay together no matter what.
There was no plan B.
We were going to work out any situation that came up because we were determined that marriage was for life. It has not been easy. Have there been times where we probably
and I think it's
thought about divorce? Yes.
Yeah, I think it's important for people who are listening. You had said this earlier, honey, that we put each other first. Sandy's always been the most important in my life, above my children. She's been the important person in my life, and we've shared that same respect and love for each other. We put each other first. Now, we know half the population in this world or in this country divorce. And to let you all know that, it sounds like, wow, 44 years, 43 years, wow, good. Man, it's been great. Well, it's great that we're still married, but it hasn't been great the whole entire time. And we came very close to walking away from our marriage. We were doing things that just were hurting our marriage. And we were both already ready just to walk away and be okay with it. And that was really bizarre that we would be okay with it. And so that didn't happen. We both felt that on the same day, God wanted to really intervene in our marriage. So I know some of you may not have a belief, but this is our story and this is what's happened. And so that day changed for both of us. And we're so glad.
We kind of got back to those roots of we're going to work through no matter what. And that, we did. We went to counseling and stuff. But marriage is always work, because both of you are always growing and changing. It's always going to be work, but you have to choose to do that work. A lot of what I see today is, a lot of young people have sexual attraction to one another, and the sex is great. So they think this is a great relationship. Well, you can't base a relationship on that alone.
Yep.
It just can't. It won't last. And love is not a feeling. Love is a decision.
And a commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it would be a surprise to people who are listening, or have you ever heard this, that and this is happening to us, it's certainly happening to me, that I'm falling in love with my wife all the time. Our love is growing stronger for us now. You wouldn't think that would be possible because, you've been around with each other for 43 years. How can that possibly be? Are you getting tired of each other? And so
sometimes
sometimes
I am tired of you, but I always choose you, don't I? Yes, I always choose you.
But I've felt like our love is growing deeper, and our respect for each other is growing deeper. And the mistakes that I've made, I'm learning from, that I took her for granted. We took each other for granted. And that's something that's very easily done. And so it's something that younger people are going to have to work on, not taking each other for granted. And I see you two, how you act with each other, and I know that you're not always in agreement with things. But I also know there's a real true commitment that you have to each other, which is great to see.
Well, it's like us too. We don't agree on a lot of things. We're always kind of nitpicking at each other, but
but I'm always right, though.
But your dad did say one thing that I think is important too in marriage is respect. You've got to respect one another, because when you start losing respect for your spouse, that's the road to destruction in your marriage. You've got to respect one another.
So I want to say something about my wife getting to me. I have in the past always wanted to have a reason for my bad decisions that I have made in hurting her, saying something that hurt her. And so I remember many times where I'll have said something and I knew immediately, guys, girls, immediately when you say something that's not right and it's hurtful. And you kind of blow it off, and like it's not. There's no follow up on that. And so I would say that, and she would say, "Well, you made me feel this way." And I said, and so then I would try to justify what I just said, and it's unjustifiable. So this happened one time where I had done or said something, and so she was incredibly wise in how she would get to me, and so she wrote me a letter, and she wrote me a detailed letter about what I said, how it made her feel. And so I'm here reading this letter, and guess what I can't do? I can't interrupt her. I can't interrupt her and come up with a lame excuse to try to justify my actions. And so I'm thinking about this. And so what has happened, as soon as I do something like that that's hurtful, there's a broken intimacy. Do you know what I'm talking about? If there's this separation, there's a dark line now. And so I remember during that period, I asked her a question, what are we going to have tonight for dinner? We're going to have beans and pork and, okay? And so there's a communication, but there's a disconnect. And so there's a disconnect. And then reading this letter, I realized, man, I blew it. And so I went to her and I said, I am so sorry. You're right. You're absolutely right. I don't have any defense. I'm so sorry I did this. Boom, just like that, intimacy was brought right back together, and she forgave me. And so there was another thing. There has to be forgiveness in a marriage. You can't hold on to this stab or this jab and not forgive, because it'll never heal.
Well, and there needs to be a willingness to say, I was wrong, because a lot of people have a hard time admitting that they were wrong and that they're sorry. And that's something you have to, if you have a hard time doing it, you have to practice doing it, because it's not going to come natural. It pretty much comes natural for us.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things if you're listening closely, when that person is sorry, and when it's not genuine. And so when it comes across, I'm sorry.
Then
really
you have
sorry,
to forgive
honey.
that.
I'm
You
really
just have to
sorry.
say, okay,
so
let's move on.
And then when I know that she accepted it, then that intimacy is bonded right back together.
We've talked about penmanship in general, or specifically in how important that is in many different contexts. But one was like keeping up with friends from abroad with written letters. And it's just funny that this is a recurring theme. You talk about writing a letter. Mm-hmm. Sam wrote me a very similar letter about a month ago. And I felt the exact same way, and I think that's like a really impactful way of
it's a very good way to communicate.
Getting across to your spouse,
Yes.
So
we've been doing this for probably 25 years.
Yes, you have.
No, you've never written me. You've written a letter back to me sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm the letter writer usually. He expresses his more than I
express
do.
it verbally.
I'm expressive on paper more than I am verbally.
And so is Elliot.
Elliot's
Yes.
a writer.
yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
I want to switch to some fun rapid fire speed round, get to know you.
And we are going to see there is a winner, and we are going to keep track.
Oh no.
So
Who said I love you first?
I think I said I love you.
He did.
that's how it goes, huh?
Yeah, he did.
That's how it goes.
He did.
Who's more romantic?
He is.
Really?
You can answer these too, Dad. Wow.
Who is the better kisser?
I remember that we would kiss at every stop.
Every stoplight with
Ooh.
Yeah.
Who's the better gift giver?
me.
Okay.
Oh.
I don't know. Dad's
what?
throwing down some cash
what?
on some nice jewelry,
here's-
man.
Expensive doesn't mean best.
But it's thoughtful.
Let me explain
Still very
that. When
thoughtful.
he does do gifting, he's very thoughtful about it.
She's a better gifter overall, overall, because she gives to all people.
Right.
So
Right.
So if
There
you're
you
talking
go.
about to each other, I guess we both give each other.
Here we go. Next
Good gift.
question.
Okay. Who's clumsier?
I don't.
You are.
Really?
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
No, you're clumsy.
No, it's rapid fire. No,
Okay.
I
All right.
guess it's you.
I don't know.
Who's the better cook?
Oh, she's so good.
Me.
She is so good.
Who spends the most money?
Me. Well, I just spend little here and there.
Yeah.
When he spends big.
Sure.
So
Okay,
I-
gotcha.
it's hard.
That's like
It's
us.
hard to
Yeah.
say who spends more.
But it's an interesting question. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's most likely to say something embarrassing in their sleep?
Not in the sleep. Huh?
You, because you do sometimes mumble in your sleep.
Okay.
Yeah, I've never heard him actually say things. So,
But I would be the
does-
one.
Who's better at keeping secrets?
Me.
Yeah, probably.
Really?
Yeah. I'd say Larry is.
Who has better taste in music?
Me.
Definitely.
Me?
Definitely.
Who is the first to apologize?
I am.
Oh. Who's more stubborn?
I am.
Who's more likely to become famous?
She is.
No. How?
Okay, next
You're- you're
just
Okay,
rapid fire.
whatever.
Next question.
Okay.
Who would survive longer on a deserted island?
Me.
definitely him, not me.
Who's more likely to talk their way out of a speeding ticket?
Me.
It's true.
If I called you from jail, what would be the first thing that you think I did?
DWI.
Jeez, okay, great. I'd say I give it to my mom.
Your mom wins?
Yeah, I think she edged.
Well, we just have
She
a
edged
tie.
out.
We decided to have a very small
tie.
gift for the winner.
We got
so
a
sorry,
gift. We
Larry.
got a
Oh,
gift.
good. But I actually won.
Sorry,
but
Dad.
that's okay.
Sorry,
But
Dad.
I would concede to my wife.
Sorry, Dad.
Do I get to open it?
Open it right now and I'll hold your mic.
Okay. Your flight schedule. Your flight schedule. Flight to Paris.
Oh my. You guys. Oh
So
my
I'm going without Dad? Oh my gosh. Okay. You guys didn't have to do this. That's awesome.
We love you. You didn't get to go to Paris, and that's where we want to take you. So we're going to go to Paris with you guys.
That is so awesome. That is so awesome.
Thank you guys.
For me and all the stuff that you've done for Sam and I in the last 7 years. So we want to give back. So
Thank you.
we're excited.
Yeah, we are too.
We do love you guys so much.
This was fun.
It was fun.
It was not
And
what I
now we're going
expected.
to Paris.
Are you guys going with us?
Yes.
Yes, we're going with you.
You're going with us?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you were just sending us.
No, sorry.
to Paris.
We are going with you. Us four are going
Are
to
you
Paris.
driving
that's
in
gonna be
Paris?
No, we are
absolutely
not driving in Paris.
Okay, good.
It would. You know what? It wouldn't be the same without you.
Sam and I want to thank you so much for listening to Something More Human. If you're enjoying the podcast and want to support us, there are plenty of no-cost, minimal effort ways you can do so.
For starters, you can subscribe to the show on your favorite listening platform. You can leave us a 5-star review, drop us a comment with a topic you'd like to hear us discuss in an upcoming episode, and you can also keep up with us on Instagram and TikTok. Give us a follow there at Something More Human. Thanks so much.
Thank you.